So right now, what I'm gonna do is start working on blocking off this and also dealing with power steering stuff. I'm also waiting for the steering components to show up. So I've got the shaft, it's showed up. And I'm just waiting for the U-joints for the gearbox and for the steering column. For the time being, we've decided that we aren't going to run a heater in the car. I think eventually that will change, but now that we would just want to get it running and get it on the road, which means in the meantime that we've got to block off the heater hoses. I looked all over the place for solutions, checked online, all that sort of stuff, and then I headed to the forums. And I know Tim has talked about that before, and they are the best resources for information. And what I ended up finding was this guy here. Now, it is made by Dayco. The part number is 87629. What I'm going to be able to do with this is basically kill two birds with one stone. I was looking for two separate pieces. Now I just have one. I think this side is too long, and I'm probably going to need a little bit of lubricant to get this on because I actually do think this is a little bit smaller. And that slid on without so much as a whisper of a problem. No issues there. It might be a little bit big around here. I mean, I could trim it down, but then I lose some flexiness to it, so it might not be as easy to slide on. So I'm happy with that. It's a good block off for the time being. It'll do exactly what we need until the time comes to install a full system, probably a vintage air or something like that. Those things aren't cheap, so I'm gonna have to save some pennies. On to power steering. One of the issues that I'm running into is space. I did do some research because I was a little bit confused on things, and my solid line at the back, the one that's actually a part of the housing, is the return line, and then the line on the bottom is the pressure line. This is the pressure line here, I believe, and this is the return here. So I'm gonna start to get things figured out on how I can hook this up. It's pretty much all set and done. The hose is in good shape. There's no cracking, and it just misses inside of the frame. So I got lucky on one thing and then unfortunately crashed and burned on the other. This guy here, which is the pressure line that goes on the back of the power steering pump. I was having a hard time getting it into the spot where it needed to be beside the frame here, but I cut it down and it managed to fit no problem at all. But the sadder part of the whole situation is that I had grabbed these guys here to go into the pump, but then I realized I'd ordered the wrong ones because this is the original pump off of the square body and this is the pump out of the Yukon. So I just need to find the right connectors here, which I'll try to track down tomorrow, and get my high pressure hose here, and then I can get everything hooked up. I'm gonna adapt it over to and fittings. I've read a lot about it online, and some people say it's the best thing to do. Other people seem to be a little bit wary. The thing that I'm really not sure of is the pressure that goes behind the fluid in the system. I've got high pressure hose. My only wonder is when I put clamps on instead of crimped on fittings, whether or not they will be strong enough to hold. Some people online on different forums say yes, other people seem to question it a little bit. We're gonna give it a try. Worst case scenario is it doesn't work and then I have to get some hoses made, but this will at least get us hooked up and pretty much get that end of the steering done. The unfortunate thing for me is, where I would have liked to have hooked all of the steering up today, is that I am missing my one adapter here, my U-joint. I can't find them in town. I've run all over the place. I've tried ordering them online. They keep getting canceled. I'm going to just cross my fingers that the one that I just ordered is going to show up, and maybe we'll be okay. Maybe we won't. I don't know, but I can get some other stuff done in the meantime. Got my 90 degree here. I'm going to just stick it into the back of the power steering pump. Now, the one thing that is a big difference is that this is a conventional LS connection with the O-ring on the end, and then we're just going to stick the hose on there. Coming over to this side, this connection is completely different, which is where where the and fittings are going to come into play. I've got to do a 5/8 and an 11/16 because the return and the feed are two different sizes. And then what I'm going to do is connect this 90 degree and onto that, and I'm going to attach some hoses to it. As you can see, we've got a flare on the end of this guy too. There we are, all hooked up, got my end fittings on. Like I said, got these worm clamps on here. I hope they hold, but if they don't, it's not the end of the world. We'll get some hoses made up. There are some places locally that can do that. We're all hooked up in there too. Routing wise, I'm not 100% sure of, because I'm not sure where the fender's gonna fall. And I can't put the fender on right away, which is a problem because I'm still gonna get the steering done. So what I'm gonna work on now is getting the drag link set up. Got some Napa parts here. I have 2 clamps because we weren't sure what size. So once I get that done, then I can actually get this back on. It's actually not a huge deal and not an absolute necessity, but it's something that I've been meaning to do for a while. Grab the old one that I had lying around after we took the truck apart. It's kind of floated all over the garage for the last little while, and basically tried to line up the new one the best that I could. Everything is kind of loosey-goosey here for the time being. I do remember that it is the short side goes towards the front, and it's the one that goes up, the long side towards the back of the car, and it goes down. All hooked up. So now I'm in a bit of limbo. You have no idea how much I want to get that steering shaft on. So while I'm waiting for those parts, there's little things that I can do that I've been ignoring. So sometimes things can turn out to be a little bit serendipitous, if that's the term to use. I think it applies here. Anyway, I decided to clean things up a little bit. One of the things that I had mentioned in the startup video, the terminator and the fuel pump need to have constant power while the engine is cranking over. Most accessories turns off as the engine is cranking. So to get things going, you can see my nice little splice job here. That worked and did the trick, but what I wanted to do was put it into a distribution block here with some fuses in it to make it look nice. So what I'm going to do is do some cleanup here, run the wires where they should be, get these guys connected in the right spots, and then I will be a happy guy. And there we go, nice and clean. The only thing about it that I don't like is that the one yellow wire has a red end on it. But for the tiny length that I needed to get it on, and the fact that I looked everywhere for some yellow wire and I couldn't find any, I think that that will be just fine. So now it's hooked up nice. We've got a little bit of extra protection there with the fuse in, and I will be on to my next job, which I think it's high time that I deal with this cover plate here and get it covered up, and then I can get the bolts in on the back of the brake booster. So I just got to read these wires and see where I got to stuff them. I think they've got to go inside, and I think they're all wires that I'm not going to use. Can get the plate back on. These guys I know for sure are the wires that have to stay in the engine compartment. I may have to do some trimming here or put some sort of spacer in because there's a little bump where some of the former cabling and stuff like that came out, but this guy's not tight. So I'm just gonna leave it floppy there, and we know that it's super easy to take on and off. This has been an adventure. I'm trying to assemble the steering shaft. Now, I'm not using the shaft or any of the original components from the truck. Like I said in an earlier video, I've got a steering column out of a Camaro. It's going to work perfectly, which means I have to assemble something using U-joints and plus a steering shaft that I got online. So the problem has been this guy. So it's a DD rod that I'm using. This is a 1" to 3/4 DD U-joint down to a splined to 3/4 U-joint. The issue here is that I ordered one, it got canceled and no one notified me, so I ordered another one and it never showed up. So then I tried for the third, hoping that third time was the charm, and it did arrive, but man, was it tight. And I think the one thing that I've learned is there was a lot of options online that I could go with, some very expensive, some mildly expensive, and some super cheap. I tried to stick in the middle, but I think that you're still sacrificing some level of quality because I had to do a lot of finicky work to get it on. And even at that point, it needed to be tapped in. Like, I don't think that if I wanted to take it out, this is ever coming off the end of that shaft. I don't know that it really matters, and it is just a steering column. I could get another one. So now what I'm left to do is get everything assembled, put this guy on, do my measurements, and hopefully it won't take too long. So I've measured out to 7/8 of an inch, which you can see just gives me a little bit of space poking past the one collar. I've screwed these in super tight. Hopefully they'll leave a mark, so it'll make life easier for me. And then what I can do is use those to dimple the rod so that they'll sit in better and they'll hold nice and tight. Once I've got them in there and I know nothing is gonna move, then I'll move up to the top and I'll do my measurements, cut it, and do the same thing for that end. It might be hard to see on camera, but there's my one mark right there, and then I've got kind of another mark right there, which will be a good enough. Get my drill out, get those divots in there, get it back on the car. So it is in. Basically what's left for me to do is just dimple these guys here. It really wasn't that hard. Took a little bit of persuasion from this guy, but not much at all. But that means we actually officially have steering now. So I'm gonna get these few things done and I'll be right back with the finished product. So I've got my ends dimpled. This one I actually went right through so I could get the bottom bolt, so the one closest to the gearbox, in as far as I could go, dimple on top. So now it's just a matter of lining everything up and getting my U-joints all set in place. In we go. Got to make sure to line that up with the flat spot. Down we go. Everybody's lined up there. So now it's just a matter of me getting some Loctite. So somebody who had done it online had actually said to use red Loctite. That makes me nervous. So I'm going to use some blue Loctite because some Loctite is better than no Loctite, but if I ever want to get this apart, again, for whatever reason, I don't really want to have to heat things up. So there, just tighten up the top nuts. Now I know somebody's probably gonna say something, and I did try my best to get this in as deep as I could. I drilled a hole straight through and I fought with it for a while to get things lined up, and it just wasn't lining up. I know that it's in to the metal. I can feel it when it goes through. There's a good dimple up here for this guy too. I really don't think that they're gonna go anywhere, especially after these guys are locked up. So for the most part, I think that our steering is all done and set, which means that's a huge step and I can get on to putting the fenders back on.